So I'm just going to go on here. This is a continuation from my last one about the pharmaceuticals that I believe are actually doing sometimes more damage than good. Since the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for Mental Disorders came out in 1952, the number of diagnostics has steadily been on the rise. From the slender 130-page booklet to listing 106 so-called mental disorders, the DSM has bloated into a massive 886-page book where not only this book is read and taken like the Bible by psychiatrists, but prescribed into drugs and creating new victims out of a crime, I believe, that is a bill for their own services. In fact, right now they are able to privately get government insurance monies in the amount of $72 billion from their ability of this one book, the DSM manual. It's not a diagnostics book. They give you a label, and the label is used for billing purposes only, and that's how they get paid. There's not really care for you in there when the money makes sense, right? The order that they have made this book is where it can be taken and made to get into someone's life and head that something exists, when in reality it's nothing more than your own human emotions that can be dealt with. And then they create this fictional money laundering scheme out of people more by telling them that they have this mental health disorder and prescribing you the medication for it and treating this disease, calling it a disease, and writing it up as a prescription for a new disease. And so just because they get their vote in and they can create a fictional disease, they can create all these commercials for the drug cartels or the drug administrations all over the place just to market the hell out of it, doesn't make it right. And they got their respects from the leaders because simply made these real doctors, as it were. It was not just because they were real doctors or they were marketing for their drugs, where we're not also being set up to feel like people at all. If something was wrong with them, well, they were being deemed as if, like, you don't take these things, well, now you're in danger to the cartel. And so we see the commercial interests that they prey on people's as sadness and negative emotions. And then they ask your and then you can ask your doctor about this, because they want you asking your doctor about these things, and you go into the doctors basically asking for their medications by name. But it's not because they care about you or your sadness and the symptoms that you're feeling. They just pray over you to be sad enough to ask for those medications by name. Of course, first the public has to believe that something is wrong with them, and that wrong that they feel was biochemical, and then it was supposed to be treated as such with a drug that's supposed to cure all, fix all sort of drug. And they started just looking into it from a biochemical standpoint from there on, and was just a chemical. They're calling it a chemical imbalance in your brain, and that in order to fix it, you needed to take an inhibitor of that drug that they're giving you in order to treat the chemical disorder, the chemical imbalance, as it were. It wasn't only used as a marketing technique over anything real scientific to support it, but the fact is that there's things like cannabis that cure cancer, purple carrots that can cure cancer, other things in the organic form that were curing cancers, because, well, we all have cancers. It's just a matter if they take over the body. Nobody has ever been acquitted to a test that shows that there's factual chemical imbalances inside of their brains. So how can these people market a drug to fix a chemical imbalance that they can't even prove exists inside of the brain? And from my studies, these things actually, and from actual scientific evidence that I've found, it actually makes the brain much more gray than colorful, where a person can smoke a joint and that brain is much, much more colorful in all of the colors of the spectrum. So you can see that a person able to reason with themselves in this kind of way is just to prove to a fact that your brain is actually much more active and it's much more healthy. Much when you have a broken bone and you have x-rays so you can see that the fracture is there, you got a broken bone or what have you, the screening method is of that x-ray. They don't have a screening method at all for these chemical imbalances, as it were, just to be able to promote and sell drugs. Just like the commercials if you see on television where people all of a sudden feel great and that this drug is their go-to for their cure-all medication, that they recommend it to you because if you're feeling any one of these quote-unquote human emotions they call symptoms, well, you go in, you get this drug and it's going to make things better and you're not going to feel like a ghost any longer. You're going to come into yourself and you're going to feel good and you're going to feel joy. And while the drug companies and psychiatrists have used this myth to sell billions of dollars worth of psychotropic drugs and putting them into the bodies of unsuspecting patients, the public has been paid in the ultimate price, losing loved ones, losing family members, new moms having their first children in an imbalance in the brain that could be ultimately thrown on antidepressants before they're even able to speak. We see article headlines all of the time that tell us what to think, what not to think, but no one teaches us how to think for ourselves. So it becomes a real issue before they even arise as people to take these drugs in the first place unwittingly and blindly thinking that they are going to get help to treat their depression, their sadness, and becoming forced to take them, even on Jarvis orders and said such. Meanwhile, the sadness lingers, much like it does in life itself. And there's no drug that can shield you from whatever the future holds for humanity. There is no cure-all medication to make it all feel better, and even if there were, the questions you should ask yourself is this right? It's an estimated almost half of the suicides that have happened in the past years were of people that were on some sort of psychotropic drug. It's found that the trench coat mafia, per se, were all in remittance from not being able to get their the drugs that they were put on. And if you ask me, the rage that you saw there was created by it being a built-up thing inside of them based on an addiction that they didn't really understand they had, because it's not sold to you as like these things are addictive and they're chemicals inside of these things are addicting. But it's estimated that these drugs are now killing over 2.5 times more people than are killed by homicide. And so who is there to protect the public against these real dangers of psychotropic drugs? Is there anybody? And when there are, I believe these people are just being eradicated, much as you've been seeing and witnessing in my own work. So in the United States, it is the Food and Drug Administration, whose administrative panel is dominated mostly by these psychiatrists who shuttle between the Drug Administration's academia, the Federal Drug Administration, and the government, the big revolving door that we have come to face up with the FDA as half the reasons why the system is working so poorly in the first place. This revolving door is a direct assault, if you ask me, but it's a result from the groups of people within the same mindset that are putting people into the same positions of power, allowing me to remind you that they're put into positions of being regulators, formulators, and sellers and marketers, so that the panels that are formed by the FDA to evaluate these drugs in the same crooked psychiatrists' offices and drug owners that are 100% in conflict with the interests of the people, because they not only create the disease out of thin air, just like they are the money these days, but then they create the medication as if it were to regulate the safety as such. And they play with fire real well, if you ask me. And that it gets to an administrator into the world of a plethora of psychotropic drugs that are ultimately screwing up the minds of men, women, and children. They're not helping one single person at all. So you have to ask yourself, people, if they're making money off of you in the same way with these drugs, and no one is here to evaluate the situation, they're selling you into the public as if it's a cure-all type of medication, and it isn't doing anything good for humanity or society as a whole. And this is my opinion, if I'm entitled to that anymore. Fact of the matter is that mental health of a notation does not improve with these tightly knit little half relationships with the pharmaceutical companies and the psychiatrists' offices in the first place, and the FDA, all of which go hand in hand, all mutually supporting each other and patting each other on the backs. It's all money, and it's crooked. Take for an example the FDA drug evaluation panel that approved Paxil. Every single psychiatrist person on the panel had financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry, and these conflicts of interest have been rampant, enough to stir up congressional investigation into the matters. And when people are making their checks and balances to ensure that there are no financial ties to the FDA where the drug cartels are approved 100% of the time, that there were to be found conflicts of interest there, founded by the people on that committee that never filed appropriately to the stocks and bonds that they owned, that would surely be viewed as a conflict of interest by the law, supposed to the documentation of these things happening. So you just imagine a person that is making money off of said drug. Well, they put their money inside of the stock and bonds of those drugs. So they're not only making money in one way, but they're making money in two ways. And then it's also supported by the revolving door of your government. So I highly believe that that's a contrast of a conflict of interest for the people. And you can see it however you want. But again, this is all in my opinion. The network of marketers and their conflicts of interest between psychiatry, the drug industry, the FDA, and the government become more entrenched in 1992 after passing the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, or PDUFA. This is the bill that the FDA would be paid a fee of, say, $100,000 per drug to ensure that these psychotropic drugs were to be rushed in through the approval process and into the hands of the physicians and psychiatrists faster than ever. I recall my doctor first telling me that he didn't even agree with these medications, but that he thought that one of these was what I needed and could help me get out of a funk, and that after getting out of that funk, that I could go back to, wean off of the drug and go back to living a life normal without having the drug in my system. Well, these things being said, I actually ended up making matters worse for me, as I had just lost a loved one, a friend, and then I had lost my grandpa around the time, and I also was going to school, and I had a lot going on, and also dealing with some otherworldly things that was to suggest to me that I didn't know what was happening to me, that I couldn't explain a thing that was happening to me. It was all gone, and wrote me as if tell or not much later, he was gone and wrote me a letter saying that he was not going to be able to be my doctor anymore, that he had other opportunities to seek out, which is understandable. But today I feel trapped because of it, because I had just been dealing with those losses of loved ones, and it was used as a crutch to get me onto a medication that labeled me as a person with a mental health issue, when in reality I would have had a right to own a gun license or to obtain one, and just because you now have this label, they are seeing you as unfit to have a gun, so stripping you of your right to bear arms and the privilege of gun ownership, which is my right to own a gun to be able to protect myself and my family from said a criminal animal per se that I could go up in my attic and shoot. So Congress told the FDA that there were jobs that no longer made things, that the drug cartels or the drugs themselves are clean and safe for people or effective at all. Instead, their jobs was to hurry up their drugs and get it on the market faster than ever. They acted and set priorities of that FDA as if it were a fee paid for a particular drug approval, that it would be placed on the fast track and rushed into the marketplace as so to collect more funding from the establishments that were all well in cahoots with each other. And then they would give them less standards to work within when the FDA would have normally given it into said, like actual ability to maintain the safety for millions of sales. But instead, in my opinion, it was fast tracked in my own situation regarding my not regarding my safety over the sales that they could make. Since the passage of the PDUFA, drugs ran from 2-year approval time to only 6 months or less time to even get it approved, hyperinflating the business of mental illness all the time, and people could quite well remember these commercials coming about on the televisions, introducing it into your minds that if you're feeling this way or that way, that you're probably depressed and you probably need this new drug. Though people know they're fast tracking the people in the public faster into disaster than anything else. As far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what happened with me in my life, and I'm not gonna just idly back down and go back into, oh, you can just be lopped off out of your mind, unable to reason for yourself, while I'm also being poisoned at the time that I didn't understand until in the recent discovering the patterns that I can't remit as if it were such as anything else other than it was. So you could imagine they sped traffic up to 4 times faster than they were already going, and even faster than that with some of the medications that they came out with. So imagine how many people would die if they were to approve these fast tracking levels as speed limit signs of such, as if they fast tracked the FDA to approve drugs. I mean, there should literally be police pulling these people over for driving too fast everywhere. And 4 times faster everywhere. Imagine that on the roads today. Seeing a 60-mile-per-hour sign. Well, now we're just giving the FDA the fast track to go 120 miles per hour and even faster, as long as it were to be quote-unquote helping people live better lives. Right? Wrong. This is much of what I see in that the Drug Administration is doing to these people, is setting them on the fast track into their preordained deaths, as it were. It rakes in huge profits for both psychiatry and the drug industry, and the sooner the drug is approved, they can start selling it and make that cash flow real nice and snug, and it's big money. Every day, the average psychotropic drug grosses over $7.7 million per day. And this is back from my studies from about 10 years ago. So it's probably a lot more than that today. One drug called Zyprexa rakes in almost $12 million a day. And it's probably more than that, as I've said. And even though the FDA now charges $1 million per new applicant for the pharmaceutical fast track, it shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. These drugs are the main sources of their income, so of course they aren't going to tell you any of the side effects that could be dire to your actual health. You just deal with them, and you don't know exactly the way you're feeling or why you're feeling that way. They are all helping each other to make you customers and even legally bound to their psychotropic medication that they know is not helping the individual at times. They just don't care because, well, their win-win from it makes their money all worth the while, and they make a lot of it. So who cares who they can turn into an absolute loser? The more losers that they can create, the better the money is in their favor, and they don't care about your mental health. The people come right out of school, well-trained idiots. They're junk science, not critical thinkers on any matter of any such when the money is just so lucrative. You can see it that it's all about a big money game that they're playing on the world when these drugs are usually paid for by the governments that support the FDA, that support the psychiatrists, that support the drug cartel and the administrations and sellers, and the FDA gets money back, checking in whenever they pass a drug, that these are the same people that are in the offices telling you to take one of many of their drugs. You need to be put on one of these drugs, they'll tell you, as if it's some plethora of pills that's going to try to help you out of a real environmental situation or out of a place that you're in that's causing you to feel sadness, for crying out loud. But when are we going to sound the alarm? And will you sound very sincere about it at all? Because people are not going to be that kind of people that are going to earn from you sitting across in their rooms telling you anything about these drugs in that fashion when they get to make money from the drug itself in innumerable ways, that they're giving it to you and their money in stocks and bonds and from other certain drug incentives, per se, bonuses and such. So of course they're not going to get you in agreement with anything that's being said out here on the rebuttal. But as soon as you want to get off of one, well, let's just see if we can't find something that'll hook that person and make them a customer for life anyway. They don't care if it helps you or hurts you. They care that the government is paying for your visit. That's what they care about. So you're stuck in a trapped cycle. The government is paying for your medication. They're paying for your inability in the first place and for your ability to be there, so that they get money off of what is said of a care system about you. It's not a healthcare professional system at all. And I would call it professional, but it's not professional in the way that you want it to be, in my opinion. It's a super fraudulent, powerful system that is hurting people and making a killing off of you. Not only in literal senses of the words that I'm speaking here, but this is big time money profits here. And follow the money. When you realize that there's no real money in healthcare and actually creating people's health to not be sick, well, the incentive is to then keep people sick. There's big money in managing disease, especially ones that will never go away. No cures can be gotten and no cures can be found. Meanwhile, like I've said, holistic doctors go away in droves and you can't even question it. Who the fuck are you? You don't hear them talking about curing diseases. which I sincerely believe that there is cures for all disease on earth, but there is more money to be made in actually helping people, making sure that they're not so healthy at all. And so-called psychiatrists have become mainstream doctors in America today, and that is all because of the pharmaceutical industry. And they can thank that the mainstream industry for it because, or you can thank the mainstream industry for it because they have a shitload of more money than what they used to, and the drug administration can thank them because now they have thousands of soldiers in their army ready to distribute these drugs far and wide and get everybody on them. I'm going to stop this here. Please pay attention to my next works, and I'll continue going on